It's Charter Local Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. We are in Palm Springs at the California State Association of Counties Convention. We are joined by Bruce Gibson. He is a supervisor in beautiful San Luis Obispo County. I am walking up and down the halls, and a lot of your colleagues in the 58 counties are talking about Prop 64.
Yes.
The passage of marijuana legalization.
Yes.
Passed in every coastal county, including purple-ish San Luis Obispo.
Yeah, biggest social change we're going to deal with in a generation.
Tell me about that, sir.
One side or another.
Tell me
you know,
about
the changing attitudes toward the use of marijuana, starting with medical and now with recreational legalization, is a huge. It's a big change in how we deal with this substance that has had so much of an effect.
And I do want to talk about how quickly that change occurred.
Right.
As you may remember, back in 2010, Prop 19 was on the ballot,
Right.
and that called for the legalization of marijuana.
Right.
It got under 47% of the vote.
Right.
6 years later, Prop 64 gets
Right.
over 57% of the vote.
And
10 points.
10 points, a big deal. I think the folks who are promoting Prop 64 learned from Prop 19. And there's some structural differences there.
Okay.
And not the least of which is providing a great measure of local control. There's some baseline things that this will enable within the state. But then local jurisdictions, cities and counties, are in a position to choose how far and in which ways they want to go.
And let's talk about San Luis Obispo County. If I remember correctly, I don't believe you have any medical marijuana facilities in the county.
We don't have any brick and mortar dispensaries.
Okay.
The county is one of the excuses in turning the last one down, which
Right.
is a decision that I didn't agree with.
Okay.
One of the excuses, well, we have mobile delivery services,
Right.
so those are fairly common,
Okay.
but no brick and mortar. Now, are we going to see a change because of Prop 64? Quite possibly so.
I mean, that's the question. You have, I think, is it 7 cities in your
We have
county?
7 cities.
7 cities, the county, which
Right.
has significant unincorporated areas.
Right.
And so you have those 7 cities
Okay.
making decisions, the 8th.
Yeah, the 8th jurisdiction. So we'll see. I mean, the question of cultivation changes. Outdoor cultivation probably will be allowed within some boundaries in terms of impacts and size of growth
And let's talk
and
about
things
outdoor.
like
I mean,
that.
Paso Robles, that region is completely transformed thanks to the wine industry.
Right.
And so, look, it's an intoxicating substance.
Right, and I think that's the change, and it's one that I embrace. It is an intoxicating substance. With it comes challenges. With it comes economic activity. I've often said that right now we have a certain amount of problems with the use of marijuana, whatever they are, impairment, addiction,
Right.
Illegal activity.
Although one could argue, and believe me, I'm not an expert, but I've always been told marijuana is not physically addicting,
And-
whereas alcohol arguably is.
I would say, I think just to be honest, we've got to understand or let's assume that there are going to be folks who have a troubled relationship with any intoxicant.
Well stated.
So we're going to need to treat addiction, however it manifests itself. We're going to have workplace rules that
But
make
the
sense.
question is, and I want to get a sense from you as a kind of a student of society,
Yeah, and
with the legalization of it,
Right.
does addiction increase or decrease? I mean, one could argue it's not, forbidden fruit.
It's not clear, but let's assume that it will. The greater access to it,
Okay.
taking it out of the shadows, let's say it does. My point has been that we have to understand that this change is going to happen, and we need to provide the resources, in government, whether it's county, and counties are largely responsible for health care issues for those who can't afford it. We're going to need to step up and appreciate that we'll have to address some of these problems. We're going to have to address the problem of how it's grown, where it's appropriate to sell it, where it's not appropriate to sell it.
Some counties have made the decision that they're not interested in brick and mortar stores, and that's it. I mean, they've already gone on the record.
Right.
And I understand that, and that's legal under the Riverside case.
Sure.
But the question becomes, if people want marijuana, they'll drive somewhere to get it.
I agree.
And so if you're in San Luis Obispo County and your county makes that decision, which it may not, go to Santa Barbara, go to Monterey, go to Kern.
So
that presents its own challenges.
That's the way I've been describing it. I say if we come in and decide that we're going to ban cultivation or ban brick and mortar dispensaries or ban other aspects of it, in some thought that somehow we are going to keep away the negative impacts of wider use of marijuana, I think we're fooling ourselves. So my approach to it is say we have to reach out, we have to step up and embrace the fact that this is changing and devote the necessary resources to taking care of the negative impacts.
Well, there are 5 members on the Board of Supervisors.
Correct.
What are your colleagues expressing? I know you can't talk because of the Brown Act, but do you have a sense?
I think there's a wide spectrum. I know one of my colleagues has been very critical of the war on drugs and the whole criminalization of marijuana as a substance and might have one view. Other colleagues, I think, are more of the mind that we need to really clamp down on this.
But one could argue, if one is a conservative Republican, and there are a few members on your board that would classify themselves as such, that as a conservative Republican, I'm taking a libertarian position, which is, government out.
And a functional position. Where I first heard talk of legalization was from some of my most conservative colleagues in the northern part of the state who had been burdened by the illegal cultivation and sale and other consequences of it for many, many years. They led the charge on this, frankly. I think that's what tipped the political balance on it. Now we need to understand, again, we're going to be dealing with consequences. I hope over time that decriminalization gives us less problems if we treat those things like addiction and impairment that we need to. We're going to need the funds to do that, so a rational taxation of it, as we tax alcohol, is going to be important.
Well, let's talk about taxation, because under 64, the state has the ability to tax 15%, as to local governments. Some local governments put on the ballot, in conjunction with 64, if it passes, we're going to pass this tax. There is concern that the taxes get so layered that it becomes too expensive to buy legally and you buy illegally.
And you do, and that's part of the balancing act. The other thing that I have heard and that I subscribe to is the idea we're not going to get this right on the first go round. We're going to have to be on this for decades, I think, to really come to grips with it. We're going to have to look at what we do and assess with a very objective eye whether we've gotten it right, whether we still have tweaks that.
So here we are at CSAC. The key organization for county supervisors. Are there sessions about Prop 64?
Absolutely.
What are you hearing?
Well, there was a session to this morning, an hour and a half on it. I was being a land use and housing policy geek, I was in another room.
Okay, fair enough.
But
there are land use issues here.
But there absolutely, and those are the things. One of the big things that we're dealing with is how do we interact with the state, and we are very clearly telling the state, look, we're fine with this. You need to get your act together on the state's side to provide us knowledge of what you're going to do.
But Prop 64 does have some provisions about state authority.
Correct.
Governor Brown already had set up the Bureau of Marijuana Management or whatever it's called.
Well, it used to be called BUMMER, Bureau of Medical Marijuana Regulation.
But now we have...
Now it's Medical Cannabis Regulation. The thing is that there's lots of regulations to be written. How do we control pesticide use on it? How do we track and trace it? How do we register cultivators and what
You'll
size
come back
will they
when we
be?
go to Slow and talk more about this.
Absolutely.
His name is Bruce Gibson. He is a supervisor in San Luis Obispo County. We're in Palm Springs today at the CSAC convention. I'm Brad Pomerance. Thank you for joining us on Charter Local Edition.